All right, the recording is on. It's September 14, and this is the September C4 Metro Subcommittee meeting.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. I appreciate that. You just took my thunder away. That's really all I had to say today, was just announcing the date and the meeting times, or the meeting. So I appreciate that. So Brett Sherman, Happy Valley, co-chair of C4 Metro Subcommittee. With me today is Commissioner Paul Savas, also co-chair of this committee. And so welcome to all of you. Wonderful group of folks, and we've got a nice agenda set up today. So I think I will just turn this right back over to Mr. Wilson, and Commissioner Savas. I'll let you run the first portion of this meeting, and we'll rock and roll. So we're off.
Okay, well, great. Well, good morning, everyone. We don't have any presenters for Mpac this morning, so this is a great time for discussion. Yesterday morning, President Peterson testified before the OTC, and Councillor Craddock did as well. I represented and spoke on the behalf of the commission. I've read the packet this morning, and I will next week. I will not be able to attend the workshop. I have a family wedding I'm going to, so I'll be out of town on that Thursday. I do want to say that as I read the Mpac letter that's in your packet this morning, I appreciate a lot of the content that's in there, but there's something that's really missing in this whole thing. And we've touched on it, and I know it's important to all of us. I appreciate the Mpac having or starting their meetings off with the introduction of the accidents and the people who've lost their lives. The key point I'm trying to make here is safety. And as I read the letter from Metro from Mpac as a draft, I would suggest the word safety is in there at least once, I think once in the letter. But I really believe we need to put more emphasis on safety. And the one component in our testimony from the commission that's not included in the letter, as we talk about congestion pricing and drafting rules around congestion pricing or tolling, and that is having a minimal state of readiness. I think that's terribly important. I think somewhat safety goes hand in hand with that, as does alternatives for folks. So if we're going to really encourage people to change behavior, if we really want to accomplish our climate goals and all the things that the region seems to put at the very top of our goals, I think it's imperative to have that, have a minimal state of readiness. I'm concerned that some of the language I've seen, whether it's draft policy from Metro or it's draft policy from ODOT, is that there really isn't any recognition of that. As a matter of fact, even potentially we could end up with a result in which a road that is not anywhere near ready for anything, including bike traffic, pedestrian traffic, anything, could be congestion priced first before anything else is implemented. So I think it's important that we have a minimal state of readiness. And Trent, how do you want to open this up for discussion here? I see what the agenda has here, right, the Mpac workshop updates. So I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that for next week.
With the conversation that you're on now with the Oregon Highway Plan conversation and the amendments, the letter is part of today's agenda. If you want to just bump that to the front here, that certainly makes sense to me.
Okay. Comments from my colleagues around the table?
Councillor Linville.
Yeah, Councillor.
Yeah, well, I would certainly support your position, Commissioner, and I wanted to add 3 additional items that I think are missing from the letter, and maybe 3 points for Mpac to consider to be included. And one of them I've spoken to before, and that has to do with accommodating. ODOT needs to accommodate the trips by on the highways by residents and businesses of a community historically dependent upon the use of highway for local access, where there is no viable alternative to access the city center. And that we've talked about before. Am I still on? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are. You are.
Okay. Okay, I've lost you on my screen, so I'm gonna go ahead. The second one, second point is the idea of developing a maximum daily tolling limit to accommodate toll users multiple trips on the tolled highways. That doesn't seem to be included as well. And then lastly, that ODOT develop in conjunction with local governments and community groups strategies for transparent access to information and meaningful public engagement. You know, that has been an item that they have within, ODOT has put into their own documents in terms of the process, and indicated that their goal is to have developed strategies for meaningful engagement. We don't believe that they have done that. We don't see any strategies for meaningful engagement. And in fact, when we had them, the ODOT representatives at our Wilsonville City Council meeting and brought this point up, their answer was, well, could you let us know what groups or what, you know, how we might do that with the city of Wilsonville. And to me, I think, and I think for us, it was a situation where if ODOT sees that as a goal for meaningful engagement, then they need to develop the strategies and not wait for our organizations, our cities to then develop what are the strategies and how that should be done. And especially at our cost, where we were talking about developing some, perhaps some community meetings, and those would be at the cost of our individual cities and areas. So I think it's really incumbent upon them, if they're interested in meaningful engagement, they need to have formal identified strategies within our communities to engage our citizens and our communities in general. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councilor. I support your suggestions. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I am coming to this with a request that we stay really focused on the fact that this letter is in response to a draft rule. We need to stay in comment on a rule. We have a number of grievances about how ODOT and OTC in particular view local government, particularly in relation to state elected officials who they kowtow to and pretend that we don't even exist. That does not need to show up in this letter. We need to be extremely technical, and we need to be extremely strategic about responding to the rule, or else it will be like when we have at our local level hearings and someone comes in and says, I don't like pasta. Well, that doesn't matter. We are already here in the kitchen. So that's just my suggestion, is we stay extremely focused to rebutting what is wrong with the rule that they have put out. Commissioner Savas, I agree with you that we could bring safety in one or two more times to our letter, because that is something that is mentioned in brief in their draft language. But let's stay focused on this being a technical letter.
I appreciate that, Councilor. I always fall back on whether it's the vision or the stated goals of whatever organization it may be, or whatever purpose it may be. And safety is something that we all share. And I see that as one of the North Stars. And that's why I really think that the lack of emphasis there needs to be just added. We just need to put that in there. And I think that will help shape policy in a more productive way. Thank you. Councilor Pratt.
Hi. Well, I totally support the idea of putting more safety in there, because that should be our priority. And I'm wondering, on the second paragraph on diversion, there's talk about, well, there may be an interest in discouraging the use of freeways for local trips. I'm wondering if something could be added in there, like with Charbonneau, there's no other way to get over the river. You have to go on the freeway. And I think there might be other areas like that too. So just maybe a little section of sentence stating the fact that that's not always an option.
Yeah, no, thank you, Councilor Pratt. I'm having a little bit of what's the word? Maybe I should reword that. I'm a little bit less concerned, or maybe kind of encouraged by the fact that where they show the gantry, if I'm not, again, it's just a picture, it's just a map. But where they show the gantry, for example, on the Abernathy or on the 205 corridor, for example, it looks as though that the traffic going on both sides of the bridge would not be subject to the toll. If I look at the map, but that's not clearly stated. But if that's the trend, then perhaps as it relates to Charbonneau and Wilsonville, perhaps that might also be the case where the gantry is placed perhaps after the bridge or the turnoff. So, but I think including something like that would be of value. Thank you. Councilor Heisey.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you too to Mark Ottendad. I have a copy of the letter that Wilsonville sent, and it was helpful to read that beforehand. So I appreciate that. The only thing that I overall thought that the letter was pretty strong. I appreciated that it stayed focused. And I don't have specific places that I would put this, but it was in general, thinking about a number of the concerns that we've brought up here, impacts on local communities and equity issues and safety. Those are all captured in different ways by the EMAC work, by the report. So I guess my only kind of broad brush suggestion would be, rather than mentioning it in one place, to really highlight that this is an opportunity for some excellent community engagement work to lead, and perhaps highlighting that's where the OTC could really lean in a little. But beyond that, I think that this letter is succeeding in keeping the conversation where it needs to be in order for it to be heard by the people who will be receiving it. So I appreciate that. It represents a lot of work.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Heisey. So Councilor Lewis, to your point you made, I'm just gonna ask a question. Do you think that having some language about a minimal state of readiness is not appropriate?
I think that's a new concept that isn't contemplated in the rule. Do we want them adding that to the rule necessarily? I don't know. It could be something we use as local policy. It could be. It might be worth saying, we hope you will consider a minimal state of readiness. But I think there's so much wrong with the definitions and the foundation that they're starting with. I think the approach needs to be really, we are objecting to what you have put pen to paper on so far.
Okay. Is there anyone in our Zoom room this morning that is opposed to introducing some kind of language to that effect? Don't see any. Okay, well, thank you. Oh, Councilor Heisey.
Yeah, it's not an opposition, just an urging to keep it really tightly focused. And I think that when we're talking about something like that and talking with ODOT, the devils really are in the details in terms of definitions. That's where everything is routed around, so I guess I hear what you're trying to achieve, but I see how it will be pretty readily thwarted, because the definition of minimal state of readiness it doesn't exist. So it would be easy, I guess, what I'm trying to get at is for there to be a response that says sure, and it's a meaningless response. That's all. If you want to try and get it into the conversation, great. I'm flagging that there will be future work.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And again, I'm always looking for where and when and how it is at the forefront or is included somewhere. As we're developing this, we're doing something we've never done before. So if we need to add a section or do something different to recognize that element, or where we gotta start speaking about it now. And we've talked about it, but I think if we're going to be talking or speaking to the OTC and making recommendations, whether wearing the JPAC hat or wearing the RTP hat, or we're wearing our C4 Metro or C4 hats, I think that we need to start introducing that somewhere and find where staff might think it's appropriate to insert. So Trent, I see your hand up, and then I see Karen's as well.
Yeah, we may have just had the same idea at the same time, but I know that this is already captured in your C4 letter, the second one that was sent out on the OHP Goal 6. So the language, at least the concept of minimal state of readiness, is there. When we drafted that letter, to Councilor Heisey's point, we left it vague. We don't have the definition because it's, I think our perspective was it's hard to give a different policy body their own definition of what they may or may not enforce. Who is Trent when we were typing that up, right? But it is captured in your C4 letter. Y'all approved that earlier this month, and so it is in there. I think it's in the county letter as well. So it's starting to appear more broadly. This would probably enhance that conversation if it was also in the JPAC letter, but it wouldn't be empty if it didn't show up in the JPAC letter. So just want to offer that it is captured somewhere in the comments because we've started to put that in some of your language approved by this body.
Yeah, thank you, Trent. Karen?
So I would also add, so I was going to highlight that the board of Clackamas County's board did identify this within their letter. And then we as staff provided comments directly to support, well, we provided comments about potential changes to the language that could support being able to identify a minimal state of readiness. So, and then this is where you get really deep into the weeds. There are some policies that talk about how you identify the corridors that are appropriate. So adding language, what we had suggested was to add language that there be an evaluation of a corridor at the beginning of the project to be able to understand the demand management programs that exist, transit service that exists, multimodal connectivity that exists, and assess if there are significant gaps in the different travel modes in that area, and that information should be used when deciding to move forward with the project. So basically it's highlighting, hey, we need to know what's there to begin with.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. So thank you all. So yeah, I just think that we can carry that from the C4 to the JPAC tables and the Metro tables for discussion. I think that's where we can kind of expand on this. So whatever assistant staff can provide, that'd be great, and where and how to place it. So the first thing on the agenda, just going back to where the agenda is, the discussion about the workshop next week, I guess. So any comments, concerns? It's about the arterials. Karen?
So a couple of things, and now on, I believe I'm going to go back to your guys' packet. I believe it's on page 6. And so for clarity, oops, I hit the wrong button. For clarity, the workshop is actually on the 27th. So that's in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And so this is a workshop. It's one of the series, I believe, of 5 different workshops that's being hosted by Metro to get a deeper dive into a couple of different policy issues. And so this particular one is to be able to look at the policy brief that's been developed. I think they've been working on it for like past 9 months. That specifically talks to the fact that, and they're talking about urban arterials, but specifically major urban arterials, and the issues around the safety issues, the fact that these are our major community corridors, transit corridors. And then at the end of the document, there are a series of policy questions. The documents evolved over time, but there's a series of policy questions in the Safe and Urban Arterials policy brief, and that will be the focus. It's my understanding those questions will be the focus of the discussion on in 2 weeks on that Thursday morning. And so I believe that it'll be set up similar to the previous conversations with JPAC and Metro Council. There'll probably be small group tables that are able to get deeper into the issues. But the policy questions revolve around certain challenges that have been identified. And I will just sort of at a high level, the fact that, you know, there's funding that's needed, right? Capital and maintenance needs are greater than available funding. There's lack of dedicated resources to these corridors. And then there's a series of questions that follow that to address those. There's also policy and design challenges. You know, they talk a little bit, and folks may be familiar with the whole conversation of jurisdictional transfer that went on around 82nd Avenue. Are there other places that's appropriate? They've done a lot of work on jurisdictional transfer in the past, talking about that and kind of how you can update the kind of the function of the roads. So those are the two kind of main categories that they'll end up being talking about, and they'll have a series of questions that'll be discussed. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Heisey?
Just a quick, I got confused. Karen, you said it was the 27th. I have it on my calendar for the 29th. Date move?
No, hold on a second. Sorry, I guess I'm just going to go back to, and I could have said the wrong thing.
Okay.
It's in that packet on page 6. And if it says the 29th, then it's the 29th.
Okay, thanks.
So I'm sorry about that.
So there's one thing, Councilor Heisey, you sit at that table, I as well, and Councilor Lewis, you're there as well, representing Metro. Maybe you can help me, Councilor Lewis, on understanding where we are on the vision statement. I know the very first meeting was about the goals and the vision statement. And I see in the draft materials, everything used to say draft, but what's in there now, I don't know what page I'm on here. It's not clear, but it reads this: everyone in the greater Portland region will have a safe, reliable, affordable, and efficient travel options that support equitable, climate-friendly, resilient, healthy, and economically vibrant communities. Is that the proposed language, or is that the language that was initially, because the packet says two things. It was dated, this language is dated in June, I believe, in the packet somewhere. Could you help me with that?
I am not responsible for those materials, so I cannot say. I do not believe that that is where we are officially thinking we are landing. So I don't know why it no longer says draft. But in my mind, we have had 2 workshops in a series, and all of that, it's, you know, it's like the Rubik's Cube. None of it's going to be landed until we've kind of gotten through everything. So not yet finalized.
Okay. Councilor Heisey?
It does actually say draft at the top of the page. It says draft vision and goals for the 2023 RTP.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. I wasn't sure if that was revised or suggested. I'm really looking forward to that. And Councilor, I think Councilor Heisey, not Heisey, but Councilor Lewis. So if I interpreted your response is that you feel that maybe when we're towards the end, we'll be refining or having a draft vision statement, an updated one?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right, great. Anyone else have any comments about the workshop, the JPAC workshop on the 29th? Karen?
So I guess I will add that these draft, what you were just speaking to, which had to do with the draft vision and goals, that actually is an item that will be talked about tomorrow at JPAC. And so, and it won't we had a past workshop on it, but that item is going to be talked about tomorrow. Whereas the workshop in 2 weeks will specifically be about the safe and healthy urban arterials.
Okay, great. All right, well, moving us along here, the other thing that is on the other item that's on the agenda, or the next on the agenda, is the regional flexible funds conversation. Comments, concerns?
I would recommend just a quick update from Jamie or Karen about where that is and the decision status. I think a couple of things have changed since the last JPAC meeting, and so a quick update there so that y'all know what you're walking into tomorrow, I think would be fruitful.
Okay, who wants to jump in?
So I'll say a few words and then I'll turn the table over to Jamie. So tomorrow at JPAC, there will be an action item. It's my understanding it's an action item. It's a recommendation. Well, it's an action item, a decision item that then will be moved forward to Metro Council. The recommendation, TPAC recommended that and supported Metro staff recommendation, which included 2 Clackamas County projects, the Clackamas County I-205 multi-use path project, as well as the Willamette Falls Drive project from West Lynn. The one project that was not included within the recommendation is the Lakeview project that there was quite a bit of conversation about. And at the TPAC meeting, and this is where I'll end up passing over to Jamie, she can kind of talk about the additional direction that TPAC asked to be included in the packet. But that was the one project of our 3 regional flexible funds projects that did not move forward. And so the one thing that I would also remind folks is that in partnership with the regional flexible funds, there was also the recommendations for the Trails Bond. And within the Trails Bond, there were 3 projects from Clackamas County jurisdictions that were included within that particular funding source. But that particular funding source is not a part of the RFFA action. So with that, maybe Jamie, you can add a few more thoughts. We can't hear you, Jamie, even though it says that you're unmuted. So while Jamie's figuring that out, I think one of the things that I will highlight, and again, it's included within your packet today, the C4 Metro packet on pages 11 and 12. They were specific points that really TPAC identified as important for JPAC to consider as we move forward, because there was really a lot, I think as a reminder, is that we were interested in being able to move forward some of the smaller dollar project development to be able to make the complete package. Whereas this recommendation actually includes the Fano Creek Trail instead of those smaller dollar projects. That was kind of the trade-off there, really where the difference was. So the Fano Creek Trail that I believe is through Tigard is included within the funding packet. We really, and Jamie, are you back? She's having kind of technical difficulties this morning. Oh, there you go, Jamie. I'm going to pass it back over to you because you do this so much better than I.
Oh, none such. Karen is the gold standard, but I'm super excited to be learning and failing a little bit this morning. I tell you what, this is a double cup of coffee type morning. You can't see it, but I have 2 cups of coffee sitting right next to me. Albeit one is now empty and one is tea. So by way of background, there's some context that might be helpful about why the Lake Oswego project wasn't included in the staff recommendation. The staff recommendation is a little bit, there's some structure to it. The recommendation funds the top 2 priority projects in each subregion, and thereafter funds projects based on their equity and safety ratings until there's insufficient dollars to fund the next project on the list. Using this strategy, there was 1.46 million left unallocated. And with the remaining unallocated dollars, that money went to Fano Creek Trail in Washington County. So the total package is slightly over the funding forecast, but the difference could be accommodated through adjustments in MTIP programming. Leading up to the Mpac meeting, Mpac staff did quite a bit of outreach, talking to several Metro staff members and ODOT, trying to see if there is some way that we could get Lake Oswego's project in the mix, whether or not it was through the REFA process. There was insufficient support at Mpac to, the idea we brought to them was, even if Lakeview isn't in the mix, what if we had this idea of on-deck projects? Or rather, government is weird, and in the last few years, we've seen government do strange things where we have unanticipated dollars that have come available. And if that continues into the future, having projects ready to go if additional resources come available. The two projects that I suggested in that process were the Lake Oswego project, but then also the Allen Boulevard project in Washington County, which was unfunded through this process. It's a bit of a tricky conversation where that concept of having on-deck projects is new for our region, and there's not policy to really guide that idea, and it's unclear whether or not there needs to be additional conversation and perhaps direction from Mpac if there was interest in that concept. If there is interest, then it may be a conversation where we go back to the coordinating committees and solicit feedback. There's also a tricky situation where a program objective for REFA is to invest throughout the region. There is no guidance, however, on what that actually means or what regional parity means, and we can't sub-allocate federal dollars. So in this particular cycle, we've seen a scenario where one county is receiving about 70% of regional dollars, and Clackamas County is only anticipated to receive about 9%. That's unfortunate. It's not necessarily bad. Last time we punched above our weight, but there's no guidance on what parity looks like and what we can consider to help encourage what we think parity is. So that might be a conversation for Mpac to have as well, is really digging in and talking about, well, how do you feel about this regional distribution? What does investing throughout the region mean?
I think one additional thing as a part of what our conversation was perhaps that actually meant if we were thinking of this on deck type of scenario, that maybe each of the coordinating committees had a third priority that could then be considered, because I think as we talked around the table, it was unclear which one should actually rise up to be able to be those that were next in line. So as Jamie identified, really we had said through the communication to Mpac was there are certain places that really need additional discussion, and Mpac should talk about these things so that perhaps a process is set up to be ready to be able to take advantage of additional funding if it arrives.
Okay. Councilor Sherman.
Just a question. So what would happen or what historically would have happened in a scenario where there were additional revenue sources available? Does it just get spent, subjectively, or, are we looking at putting a policy in place that is just going to be kind of an overarching structure going forward? Or is it more of kind of a, for this type of circumstance situation?
My understanding from the Mpac conversation is that when additional dollars come available, they're budgeted into the next cycle. However, in this broader universe of funding, something to consider is that the region is currently paying toward bond debt repayment, and those bonds are approaching completion, is my understanding, but I'll look to Karen to nod her head and confirm. So that means additional money may be coming available, maybe not this cycle, but into the future. So it's more of a conversation of, for this cycle, what if we have additional dollars? Is this a one-time, is there interest in this kind of concept? If there is this a one-time deal, or is this something that should be part of a regular practice? And that's really a policy level conversation for JPAC to have. I don't know if that conversation will be sufficient to bring Lakeview Boulevard back into the mix. But irrespective of what happens with Lakeview Boulevard, through our staff level outreach, we've identified some additional opportunities that could potentially benefit Lakeview or a Lakeview type project in the future. So I hope to reach out to their staff to share some of what I've learned.
Thank you, Jamie. Councilor Heisey.
Yeah, I appreciate that TPAC identified these questions. I think they're interesting ones, and whether or not we can be pinned down on some specific direction remains to be seen. You know, I've spoken about this before at JPAC. I do feel like we have, as you identified, Jamie, we're in such an unusual time right now that it does make sense to me to try to prioritize some of these more getting projects ready dollars, those smaller dollars, and that in some ways can address regional parity, whatever that means to us, because it does give us the opportunity of having more flexibility to spread dollars out. I'm not necessarily thinking about this cycle specifically, but overall, I think it has that. And, you know, this is sort of building on some of Councillor Sherman's observations about the trail that was submitted, that, you know, if we aren't recognizing that at some point you have to start a project and invest in getting it started, then we're going to miss out on opportunities to build out really great projects like this trail network we're trying to establish in Happy Valley. So I guess I'm just indicating that that's my leaning in what I hope will be a fruitful conversation at JPAC, is to really think about that. And honestly, I think for the Clackamas region in this particular cycle, that could also be beneficial. You know, we just weren't ready to submit very many projects this first year. That could change. And it could be that having it known that there's that emphasis on project development in a future cycle could be a really good opportunity for our smaller cities and our stressed out planning staff and engineering staff to go, okay, how do we jump in and take advantage of this and get the ball rolling on some bigger things that we've just kind of backburnered for a while.
Right. Well, thank you for your comments. Jamie, I appreciate actually the discussion you had there about regional parity, and I do want to first of all just put out kudos and recognize the great work that you are all doing, all the staff for Clackamas County. When I first came on in my role of transportation on the representing Clackamas County, I recognized that we were not as organized and we were not as ready to bring projects forward. So we were often had nothing on some of these tables and some of these funding streams. So we've done leaps and bounds and done a heck of a lot better recently. So I really appreciate the team we've got on the staff side. But I do want to just speak to, the regional parity and maybe, I know, for example, we have we look at things in the bucket of Multnomah County, the bucket of Washington County and Clackamas County and the city of Portland. So we have these 4 buckets, but if there was a hypothetical bucket that was, regional parity or a working bucket that resolved parity or the unbalanced aspects, if there was some dedication of that, then maybe we could actually have projects submitted that were under consideration. I don't know how we do that. I'm just throwing that on the wall. I don't know if it'll stick, but if we do get some RTP or a vision around, getting the system balanced and bringing transit and bringing all these elements to the rest of the region that lacks it considerably or has nothing. I don't think we're going to make any progress unless we actually make a commitment. I just want to put that out there. And again, also applaud you for all the great work you're all doing. So anything else on this particular topic?
I mean, wild idea off the wall. We can't sub-allocate federal dollars, but what if there was a bucket that is specifically for areas along the urban periphery? So these urban expansion areas that Metro has partnered with us to expand, but don't have infrastructure and don't compete well in these processes. Food for thought. That seems a way to maybe marry our land use and transportation in a way that could be really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, maybe we can make something out of this. So just want to throw that idea out there. Appreciate it. Last but not least, and we kind of already talked about it, but we have the, well, actually not, there is one more. The RTP Vision and Goals. We kind of touched on that. Anything, staff, you want to add anything to that?
So I'll jump in here. No, I do think that this was actually a very good conversation at Mpac. Again, this Mpac discussed kind of the outcomes of the previous JPAC Metro Council workshop. And at that time, they had 4 goals that were really the emphasis, which were mobility, climate, safety, and equity. But during the Mpac conversation, we brought forward and discussed the need to really look at the vibrant communities and the prosperous economy as goals that need to be really emphasized. And that was then incorporated into the recommendation to JPAC, which was to include the economy goal. So I'm going to take a step back just to say that through the conversation and the materials that were presented to Mpac, what Metro staff had done was to take the input, and then the input was, hey, we need we have so many goals. Are there ways to consolidate those goals? And they did a wonderful job of pulling together the different goals. But ultimately, there was a grouping of about 5 goals that were pulled together into the mobility, their mobility proposal. And ultimately, we teased out the prosperous, the vibrant communities and prosperous economy, and really focused on the fact that land use is very important. And so having a transportation system that supports our economy needs to be able to be spoken to individually outside of the other goals. So with that, I think that that's kind of the foundation for the conversation that's going to move forward at JPAC tomorrow.
Okay, well, thank you, Karen. I have a question for Karen or Jamie, whoever can answer it, and that is that I appreciate really that economic piece. And we've been asking at many tables, how do, and even Councilor Pratt kind of mentioned the word meaningful. That wasn't Councilor Pratt, it was Councilor Linville, I believe. How do we bring in meaningful public involvement or meaningful involvement? And I want to say that in the guise under economics and business, I think that there is not really an opportunity for elected leaders, decision makers like ourselves to hear directly from businesses or chambers or business alliances and so forth in the region. And I don't know how we establish a meaningful involvement table for those folks. I know that staff engages the businesses and hears from them. I do know that on the new RTAC, the Regional Tolling Advisory Committee, there's a couple folks there that represent that. But I think really in the work that we do at JPAC, for example, Mpac and so forth, that voice isn't really there. They don't have a seat at the table, but maybe at least, especially during the RTP, I think we could maybe have a more meaningful opportunity to sit down and listen to what businesses. I hear what they're saying. I'm engaged with them all the time. I hear it constantly. And really that's 12 years of listening to that in my prior role as a business myself. And I just don't think that we've ever really had, I know the Portland Business Alliance is a strong voice, but it doesn't really recognize maybe some of the smaller businesses and the impacts on our local systems and our local smaller communities around the region. And Clackamas County is a county of small cities. So we don't have large cities with a large business type voice as much as the others. So just want to put that out there. Anything else on the agenda that we need to cover, Trent? Have we pretty well covered it?
For JPAC and the JPAC topics, that is the list. I think I'll just add on the conversation of economic development that the county is hiring a new economic development manager, and that recruitment is open right now. And so I think there's going to be a lot of new momentum in that capacity here from the county proper, but also working with all of your jurisdictions to do that in alignment. And I know that there's a lot of interest to have those conversations as it relates to industrial land development, housing development, finding synergies around industry clusters. And so I think some of these conversations you're talking about will build upon each other, and we're waiting for that. Not waiting, but like that economic development manager position, once it's filled, will help facilitate some of those conversations. And that's certainly something that we could talk about bringing into this to C4. We have 2 C4 tables, built around some of this. And so at a minimum, we could find a way to incorporate a voice into the C4 table. That could even be, I'm thinking out loud here, don't put me to the wall on this one, but that could be a membership adjustment that you might consider. Is there a business seat that needs to be at C4? Something to noodle. We got to retreat somewhere in the future where that can be a bylaws adjustment if you want it to be. But I think there's opportunity for that if that's where if that's a serious contemplation that you want to think about for how to connect business to the local leaders in a different way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, I want to give kudos to our staff, and good news that we're bringing that economic piece in. So thank you so much. One small thing, that's a great idea, Trent, to talk about that again. I do want to share for those who were not around then, and that was when we formed the Region 1 Act. We actually created a business representative, and that currently serves on the Region 1 Act is Bill Avison. So we have that there, but if we could expand that to maybe the regular C4, that'd be great, or perhaps even this group. So with that said, Councilor Sherman, I'm going to turn it over to you for Mpac.
Very good. Thank you, sir. So transitioning to our Mpac debrief. Council President Heisey, you up for that one today? Or Commissioner Shaw, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. Mpac met on 24 August. We had a very, very good meeting. There are 3 highlights to the meeting. The first one was a briefing from Annalise Kohler and Malu Wilkinson from Metro on the River Terrace 2.0 urban growth boundary exchange process. They showed the logic that Metro has used to identify potential properties for exchange. They ended up with 11 properties around the Metro urban growth boundary, 4 of which are in Clackamas County, 3 around Oregon City, and 1 north of Damascus. On the 21st of September, Metro will brief Clackamas County staff and the board on their refinement since 24 August. So we look forward to that. That's going to be very interesting. 11:30 on 21 September. And I think that's going to be on Zoom available. The second item we had was a briefing from Emily Lieb from Metro. That was on the 2021 Housing Bond Annual Progress Report, a very positive report overall from them. And I won't go into too much detail on that, but they have some very informative slides on the Metro website. I look for the Building for Belonging Stories from Metro Housing Bond. It was an excellent briefing. The third item we had was a briefing from Metro, from Ali Holmquist. That was on the high capacity transit strategy update. And basically what that briefing was intended to do was to inform the Mpac members on ideas for shaping the development of the policy framework vision, and emerging strategies for high capacity transit for the 2023 RTP. Now, they've asked Metro to prepare some feedback back to Metro by November. And that feedback is on questions from Metro on 1, the work plan approach and anticipated outcomes, 2, the engagement strategy, and 3, key elements and policy considerations to address for the high capacity transit update. And again, they want that by November. They also provided us with a slide with the update timeline to address this high capacity transit review. And that goes from now until somewhere between January and June of next year, where the final report will be made. And unless Kathy Heisey or Brett has got some other information, that's what I had on the 24 August Mpac meeting. Thank you.
Very good. Council President Heisey, any comments from you?
Just that I'm no longer on Mpac.
Well, I know, but you always have such insight. Well, that's a really good point. Hey, wait. I can only say, as opposed to Ms. Lorenzini, I only have 1 cup of coffee in me, so that's going to be my excuse today. I did think the conversations were very interesting. Transit is near and dear to my heart, and especially as we start looking at mass transportation. The notion of high capacity transit is spectacular, and it's the details, it's the specifics that I get a little hung up on. And so when we talk about expanding, the transit network to make sure we have frequency inside of 15-minute time frames, things like that, which Happy Valley is, when you look at the map, there's a big empty spot over Happy Valley and actually down even toward like the unincorporated Clackamas County industrial areas, big empty spot of transportation, and high capacity transit would be great. But I think some of the slides that were really, at least to me, insightful, there was an intro slide straight out, and it was, here's what we're talking about versus what we're not talking about. And what we're talking about are the double buses, the double trains. They had a picture of the West Transit system. What we're not talking about is we're not talking about micro transit. We're not talking about last mile. And those are all the things, we've got some great arteries, but we don't have a lot of capillaries. And so what I was kind of still curious about, and what I still want to kind of think through as we move forward, is the notion of creating double buses running with a lot of frequency in areas could be great, but how do you build the ridership prior to that point in time? So to me, it's about creating the frequency and the structure with smaller vehicles and then increasing those as demand requires it. So that's a lot of where I have a little bit of a disconnect. And Ms. Burek, I'm sure you've got way awesome insights that will address every question I have. So I'm just going to keep spouting for a second, because I think, as we look at that here in Happy Valley, that's really what I want to focus on. And the other issue that I had with high capacity transit is, to the best of my knowledge, TriMet's not able to hire bus drivers currently. They have huge hiring bonuses, and they're not getting people. So, and in fact, they're cutting routes, not increasing them, because they don't have the labor force. So, Ms. Björk, please help me.
So I was just going to add a few things, because I do think that the items that you talk about with regards to what are the structures that are needed to support these higher levels of transit, or what are the structures that transit structures needed to support the high capacity transit and bus rapid transit. And so one, I was going to say that the October Metro Council workshop with JPAC is actually going to focus on the topic of high capacity transit and the work there. So there's going to be that opportunity to talk about just the high capacity transit work, that update that they're doing in that venue. But secondly, Metro does have funding and will start probably after the RTP work is done, but we'll be doing it's almost like a suburban transit study. Like what do those capillaries look like? in essence. So I just wanted to highlight that work is forthcoming. I think they have really heard the fact that we need not only to study about the frequent and the high capacity transit, but we also need to understand what those structures are to support the transit that's out there, those last mile shuttles, different things like that. So that's work that's forthcoming, but is not directly talked about within the high capacity transit plan. And I think that the third thing that I will say, and we will hopefully hear about this more in October, is what TriMet is calling Forward Together. And it is the more immediate responses that TriMet is having to its current service planning in response to kind of the experience we just went through with regards to COVID, in response to the fact that they do have this bus driver shortage, and thinking more holistically about what are the best ways to provide the transit service. So we'll be hearing about that soon as well. And that's actually more immediate with respect to changes that will be coming forward. So there's different venues for different conversations.
Very good. Thank you very much. I mean, I think and this even back to some of the emerging trends that we had presented to us previously about how, we haven't seen a return to transit use, and what was the old kind of 2 bumps in ridership during kind of normal rush hour times has moved away over time, and we're seeing kind of people moving around the region throughout the course of the day. So that maybe changes the needs for the timing of ridership. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Sherman, for your comments earlier on this topic. I couldn't agree more with everything you said, but also with that lens of around the county, where we all know that we either have zero transit or substandard transit service. And it would seem that to expand into the micro transit or local shuttles or jitneys to serve the corridors would be even an improvement upon that. But one thing I always remember about my experiences, whether it's been in business or been in public service, and that is convenience. If you think about convenience, if we want to get ridership, we want to increase that, we have to make it convenient. I know that speed, that's nice, or nicer buses, or cleanliness or safety, or all those things that are also factors into people's decision. But if it's not convenient and you can't get there from here, you're not going to get the ridership you need. Essentially, I'm off base because this is Mpac, but we're on transportation. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Wilson.
I want to say my favorite transit world was when I lived in China for a year, and the buses came by and they just didn't even stop. You jumped down while they kept going. I'm not joking. They would slow down just enough and you'd grab a bar and you'd swing in. It was great, but it was convenient, to your point. I wanted to just give a quick reminder that the Forward Together group TriMet did give a presentation earlier in the year to C4, and they're going to come back in November. So they'll be at the November C4 meeting with an update on their work. So since that came up here, I wanted to shoot a quick reminder that that's on the horizon for this, at least for the big C4 group.
Very good. Council President Heisey.
This is actually a question for Trent. I remember that you called out the diversion subcommittee. I don't remember if you said it was this week or last week at C4.
It's next week. Yeah.
Next week. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, it's next week. I know it's normally the same day, but it's a weird month. So
that's all right. Thanks.
Very good. Any other comments on this topic? Do we have? Did we want to have any UGB land swap updates? Do we have some additional information on that?
I have some additional information on that. And give me a second to screen share what the calendar is. That's really what my additional information is. It's kind of giving y'all just an update on what is happening and when. And so the first couple things I want to point out on this is this giant disclaimer up here that these dates are subject to change, and then the giant watermark on the back that says draft. So Metro staff was awesome to share this with me in advance, because I know that this is a topic that is near and dear to each of you. And so want to maybe recommend working, here in September on the 21st, this is more of you see council, Metro Council, Mpac, and then broader engagement. So the Clackamas County meeting that Commissioner Scholl was referencing will happen on the 21st. It's not this thing. This is an Mpac conversation, but just know that it will be here and local. So they're meeting with local jurisdictions, as we were saying earlier. Then working backwards, I think is maybe the best way to do it. In January are when they are anticipating the reading the ordinance, the public hearing, and the second hearing. And then in December is when they expect to give work to staff to prepare for those ordinances. And so looking at that and working backwards, just wanted to share this with you. Again, these disclaimers on this page, I'm probably not going to recommend that I share this out via email just because I know that they're working on it. But if you took a screenshot of this while I was sitting here for just a little extra seconds, that would be up to you to maybe do as you wish on that one. So I'll just give it, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for whatever needs you need there. And then, yeah, I wanted to share that update because I know y'all are tracking it in different ways.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Boy, did we actually make it through to the end of our information day. Commissioner Savis.
Yeah, I have a question, maybe for Councilor Lewis or whoever wants to jump in on this. And that is, I served on Mpac way back in the early 2000s and was going to meetings before I actually sat at the table. So I've been since 2003, been attending Mpac meetings, and then up to 2007. And then as a county commissioner, I've watched some of the UGB expansions and the mid-cycle expansions and watched a lot of this. And usually it has been typically based on, is there a need or what is the need? Is there a need, yes or no? And then Metro would say, you know what, we're not going to, in the past, we currently feel that there's enough land, developable land within inside the UGB. We're not going to expand, so on and so forth. So my question is there a acreage, for example, or in type, is it housing, is it commercial, is it industrial? Is there a need for land to be included in the UGB? And do we have an acreage assigned for that? So, for example, just to make my point, we know about the Tiger One, it's going to be relatively housing, but on the topic of this chip situation that we have and the legislation, federal legislation that's come out of it, there's a big emphasis right now on providing, large lot industrial. So my question is there acreage assigned and need assigned based on commercial, industrial, and residential?
In terms of the cycles that we go through, this is our first mid-cycle, which is why we have a very prescriptive set of data that we look at to determine housing need, because it's set in state statute. And that is why we are in the position we are in uniquely right now. But as we come up on a regular cycle, we do have to evaluate both housing need and industrial need. And I think that before the pandemic, we were on course to actually do an industrial lands review. That is still on the agenda to do before the next full cycle. So we've got 3 years to complete that. And obviously the state legislature has just led a fairly complex process looking at the industrial land needs in context specifically for, I'd say, West Side large scale chips. So I don't think it's come out with an agreed upon acreage, but there's a large body of work to build off of. We don't start with the need in acreage though. We start with the need in results.
Okay. And again, I'm just going off of memory and past explanations from Metro or Metro staff, and I'm not really picking on anyone right now, but if we were to use the horse and the cart analogy, the horse was always the need and the cart was the land or whatever it may be, or the where. And it seems like on the chip side or the industrial side, we're talking about the need and really not the land or the associated land. And with the housing and the Tiger land swap, we got the cart first and the horse really not identified as far as what that need is. So as I hear, I've been reading.
I would disagree. We have a very specific proposal from Tiger that has led us to believe that we can't wait 3 years for that proposal to begin breaking ground. We have a proposal, River Terrace 2.0, that's delivering a specific number of units and has been constructed in such a way that we can see density and affordability goals are being met. And if we wait another 3 years, that's another 3 years of treading water that every single cost is going to increase. So we're negating our affordability need.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm not challenging that. I'm just trying to lay out the example of past processes. And I know that we are very process oriented. You know, I've been schooled there in that process. And schooled by, you know, all different agencies, and, you know, on the land use side, on Metro UGB expansion or whatever it may be, you know, schooled by really Metro, frankly, Metro staff. And that's not a criticism. I mean, actually, that's a compliment. That's how I intend it to be. But my point is that when it comes to the industrial side, you know, we potentially, I think we're being criticized right now for missing the boat on the chip expansion, that Ohio one, I guess. So therefore, can we afford to wait?
Yeah, and the results of the kind of statewide table, I'd say, are our guiding principle. I don't think Metro is going to come in and try and undo the work of, I mean, there were like 50 people in 4 different subgroups. I think that recommendation holds because there's a set of land use implications, funding implications. You know, it's not just land use that has prevented us. So I don't think Metro has a plan on exactly what the next step is, but the next legislative session will put some of that work into law. And I'm sure we'll be following soon thereafter.
Yeah. And thank you, Counselor. And again, I mean no offense. I'm simply, you know, acknowledging that we really are in a state of emergency in a number of ways, you know, whether it comes to housing, when it comes to our economy, inflation, a number of things that are factoring, our workforce. So we need all the above. And it just seems that under these unusual circumstances that we ought to be as nimble and open-minded and flexible as possible to try to accommodate the urgent needs upon this region. Thank you.
Very good. Other thoughts or comments today for the good of the order?
Brett, real quickly, I just want to let everybody know that yesterday we had our first meeting of the 82nd Avenue Transit Project. That project is about an 8 to 10 year project, $185 million to bring new life, updated transit to TriMet's highest ridership route. That would be 82nd Avenue. I just want you to know that's in the works now, and stay tuned. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for sharing that. Any others? Hey, not bad. All right. Well, you know, this is exactly how I wanted to start my day. So it's good to see you all. As Mr. Wilson indicated, our C4 or our I-205 Diversion and Transportation Subcommittee is a week from today. And I think we have that happen again in December, if I remember correctly, where Mpac has moved up a day or up a week versus the other. So with that, I think that gives us the rest of the day to be productive as parts of our community. So thank you all for attending. Good to see you all, and good, robust conversation as well. Take care.
Have a good day. Thank you.